The average American household earns around $75,000 a year. Meanwhile, out in small towns with one stoplight and a gas station, there are people quietly pulling in $200,000 or more from businesses you'd never post about on Instagram. No tech, no venture capital, no followers. Just trucks, tools, and services that rural America literally cannot function without. After studying the businesses with the highest survival rates in small town America, I found a pattern that keeps repeating. The uglier the work, the less competition. The less competition, the higher the margins. And the higher the margins, the faster people build real, lasting wealth. Today, I'm breaking down 15 of these businesses, starting with the ones that are easiest to launch and building toward the ones that generate the most long-term wealth. And the last one on this list, it has the potential to make you a millionaire in a small town while you sleep. No exaggeration. My name is Jack. Let's get into it. Business 15, firewood processing and delivery. Let's start with something your great-grandfather did for free and people now pay serious money for. The U.S. fuelwood market is worth $3.62 billion according to Grandview Research, and it's projected to reach $4.50 billion by 2030 at a 3.7% compound annual growth rate. The reason? A growing demand for carbon-neutral residential heating and a booming camping and hospitality industry that needs bundled firewood year-round. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think firewood is a side hustle. Cut some logs on the weekend, sell a cord for $250, maybe $300. That is a hobby, not a business. The operators making real money are processing at commercial scale, using log splitters and conveyors, and selling in two completely different markets. One, bulk cords, to residential heating customers at $350 to $450 per cord. Two, small convenience bundles to campgrounds, glamping sites, gas stations, and grocery stores at $6 to $9 per bundle. That bundle game is where the margins hide. One cord of wood yields roughly 250 to 300 bundles. Even at $6 a bundle, that's $1,500 to $800 from a cord that cost you $100 in raw logs if you're sourcing from arborist drop-offs. Operators on forums like our Sweaty Startup consistently point out the same thing. If your raw log cost is zero, which happens when tree service companies pay you to take their drops, the margins are absurd. If you're buying delivered logs at $100 a cord and selling retail, you're grinding for minimum wage. The business model lives and dies on sourcing. The person who solves the supply side owns the business. The person who doesn't is just doing manual labor with extra steps. Business 14, beekeeping and pollination services. Now, before you picture a retiree in a funny hat selling honey at a farmer's market, let me tell you what the real money in beekeeping looks like. The U.S. honey market is valued between $2.2 and $2.5 billion. There are around 115,000 to 125,000 beekeepers in the country, but over 90% of them are hobbyists. The commercial operators, roughly 1,600 of them, produce 60% of all U.S. honey. Here's what nobody tells you. Honey sales are supplementary income. The serious revenue streams are pollination contracts and selling bee livestock. Almond growers in California pay $200 to $250 per hive per season just to pollinate their orchards. A commercial beekeeper running 500 hives generates $100,000 to $125,000 just from pollination fees alone. Then you layer on honey production, which averages around $6.70 per pound retail, and selling nooks and queen bees to the booming hobbyist market. Package bees sell for $150 to $200, and established nooks go for $200 to $300 each. The pattern here is important, and you'll see it repeat across this list. You're not selling a product. You're renting a workforce that manufactures itself. Your employees don't complain, don't ask for vacations, and produce liquid gold. The startup cost is real, though. Getting to 500 hives requires years of managed growth, specialized extraction equipment, and transport rigs. But the operator who gets there has a business that's part agriculture, part livestock, and part recurring contract income. 3 revenue streams from one set of buzzing boxes. Business 13, custom hay baling services. Here's a business where most people look at it backwards. They think you need to own 200 acres and grow your own hay. You don't. The real money is in providing custom baling services to other landowners who have the acreage but don't want to invest $120,000 in balers, tedders, and rakes. The U.S. forage market is $24.4 billion. North American hay demand alone is roughly $27.7 billion, driven heavily by the beef and dairy industries. Dairy operations account for about 44% of all forage demand. That's not going anywhere. Operators on our small business consistently recommend custom baling over farming your own small plot. A custom baler with a solid rig runs 3 to 5 jobs per week during season, charging $15 to $25 per bale, plus a mobilization fee. During peak season in the right region, that's $3,000 to $8,000 per week. The season is short, usually 4 to 5 months, but operators who also offer custom planting and land maintenance extend their income across the full year. Here's the first principle you'll notice repeating on this list. Don't own the land. Own the service the land requires. The person who owns the $80,000 baler and charges by the bale will outperform the person who owns 50 acres and tries to do it all themselves. Think about it like this. It's the difference between owning the kitchen and owning the restaurant. One costs a fortune to maintain, the other just needs to show up and cook. Business 12, livestock hauling. This is one of those businesses where the barrier to entry is a truck and a gooseneck trailer, and the barrier to competition is that most people don't want to transport 200-pound animals at 4 in the morning. The global livestock transportation market is $8.6 billion, with North America accounting for roughly 8.5% of that, about $3.3 billion, and it's growing at a 5.2% to 5.5% compound annual growth rate. Single operators hauling cattle and hogs regionally report netting $30,000 to $65,000 annually. But here's where it gets interesting. Specialty transport, emergency horse hauling to veterinary clinics, show animal transport, livestock relocation during natural disasters. Those jobs command premiums that double or triple your per mile rate. Pet and specialty transport operators report $8,000 to $20,000 in monthly revenue. Let's do the simple math. If you're running specialty livestock transport and averaging $12,000 a month, that's $144,000 a year from one truck. Add a second driver and a second trailer, and you're looking at a $250,000 to $300,000 operation. The cost to start? A truck and trailer rig runs $25,000 to $60,000 used. Specialized livestock liability insurance is mandatory and expensive, but it's also what keeps casual competitors out. The insurance is the moat. It's expensive enough to discourage everyone who's just curious, and that's exactly what protects the people who are committed. Business 11, gravel and aggregate delivery. This might be the least glamorous sentence ever spoken on YouTube, but somebody needs to hear it. The U.S. aggregate and crushed stone market is worth between $117 and $165 billion. The dump truck services sector tied to it is $27.1 billion in 2026 alone, according to IBIS World. There are roughly 74,000 dump trucks registered for construction purposes in the U.S., with about 18,000 dedicated to aggregate hauling. Operators charge $65 to $170 per hour, depending on region and load size. A single dump truck running 4 to 6 loads per day, 5 days a week, generates $1,500 to $4,000 in weekly revenue. Annually, that's $78,000 to $208,000 from one truck. Here's what nobody tells you about this business. It's feast or famine. Construction season runs March through November in most regions, and winter can be brutal. Operators on Reddit recommend keeping a $20,000 emergency fund strictly for truck repairs because a blown transmission at the wrong time can take you out for 3 weeks. The advice that comes up over and over, don't buy a new truck. Start with a dump trailer behind a strong pickup or buy a reliable used truck. Being responsive to phone calls and showing up on time is enough to beat established competitors because, and I'm quoting an actual operator here, most guys in this business are grumpy and unreliable. Showing up with a smile and answering your phone is apparently a competitive advantage. That's the state of the industry. Business 10, the rural laundromat. I know, a laundromat. But listen to this. The U.S. coin-operated laundry industry is approximately $7.2 billion. The average laundromat generates $504,000 in annual revenue, with profit margins between 20% and 35%. And here's the number that stops most people cold. The 5-year survival rate for laundromats is between 94% and 95%. Compare that to any restaurant where half are gone before the second anniversary. Rural laundromats play a completely different game than city ones. One rural operator reported $160,000 in annual revenue, with roughly $80,000 in net income from a single location, serving a 50-mile radius with zero competition. That's the key phrase, zero competition. In a city, there's a laundromat every few blocks. In a rural county, there might be one, or none. Buying an existing rural laundromat costs $40,000 to $200,000. New builds run $200,000 to $500,000 or more. But experienced buyers on our small business are consistently warned never to pay more than 2 times the seller's discretionary earnings, unless real estate is included in the deal. And the silent killer? Equipment age? Finding service technicians willing to drive out to a small town to fix a commercial washer is notoriously difficult. The operators who learn to service their own machines save $5,000 to $15,000 a year and eliminate their single biggest operational risk. There's a lesson here that Michael Gerber captures perfectly in the E-Myth Revisited. The person who builds the system to run the laundromat will succeed. The person who becomes the laundromat's employee, doing every repair, every coin collection, every mop-up, will burn out in 18 months. The goal isn't to own a laundromat, it's to own a system that happens to wash clothes. Business 9, farm fencing installation. And here's something almost nobody tells you. This is where things start getting really good because the economics are almost unfairly simple. The U.S. fence construction and installation market is estimated at $20 billion in 2026, according to IBIS World, with a 2.9% compound annual growth rate over the past 5 years. The broader fencing products market sits between $9.8 and $13 billion, growing at 5.3% to 5.5%. Individual contractors report clearing $5,000 after 8 days of labor. Established companies scale to multi-million-dollar revenues. The cost to start? A truck, a trailer, and a skid steer with an auger. That's it. Here's the part nobody mentions. The key to high hourly profit is ditching the manual dig and cement methods for mechanical post drivers and augers. What used to take 3 days now takes 6 hours. You charge the same price. The customer doesn't know or care how fast you work. They care that the fence is straight and solid. Experienced operators charge per hole and per panel plus materials, and they add a 10% to 25% premium for rocky or sloped terrain because most beginners won't even quote those jobs. Think about it like this. Every farmer, every rancher, every rural property owner needs fencing. Fences rot, storms blow them down, cattle push through them, property lines change. This isn't a one-time sale. This is a business where the customer comes back every 5 to 10 years and refers you to every neighbor in the county while they wait. Still with me? Good. Because now comes business 8, portable restroom rental. And yes, I'm completely serious. The global portable restroom rental market was valued at $20.71 billion and is projected to reach $34.86 billion by 2030. In rural America, every outdoor event, every construction site, every festival, every fair, and every farm project needs portable restrooms. And there is almost zero competition in most small counties. A single standard unit rents for $125 to $175 per month. Premium units with hand washing stations go for $250 to $400. Let's do the math. If you own 50 units and average $200 per month per unit, that's $10,000 a month. $120,000 a year. Scale to 100 units, $240,000. The servicing route takes one employee with a pump truck visiting each unit once a week. Here's the uncomfortable truth about this business. Nobody wants to talk about it at dinner parties. Nobody's posting their portable restroom empire on LinkedIn. And that's exactly why the margins are what they are. The boring factor is the advantage. Nobody's competing with you because nobody thinks it's exciting enough to try. When was the last time you saw a TikTok about starting a porta potty business? Exactly. That silence is your moat. Business 7, mobile agricultural equipment repair. When a $400,000 combine breaks down during harvest, the farmer doesn't browse Google reviews. He calls the guy with the service truck who can be there in 2 hours, and he pays whatever that guy charges, because every hour that combine sits idle costs the farmer thousands in lost yield. One mobile operator reported grossing roughly $67,000 in their first partial year of operation, with industry benchmarks suggesting 55% profit margins per job. That first year number matters because it's a partial year. A fully established mobile ag mechanic in a farming-heavy county easily crosses $150,000 to $250,000 in annual revenue. The startup costs are real but manageable. A fully equipped service truck, an F-350 or similar with a welder, compressor, and diagnostic tools. Total outlay $40,000 to $80,000, depending on whether you buy new or used. Operators on Reddit and local Facebook groups consistently report that word of mouth is the only marketing they've ever needed. You fix one farmer's tractor during harvest, and by next season, you've got 30 clients who all know each other. Here's what separates this from a regular mechanic shop. You go to them, the equipment can't come to you, a combine doesn't fit in a garage, a grain dryer doesn't roll down the highway. This creates a natural monopoly in your service area. If you're the only mobile ag mechanic within 40 miles, every farmer in that radius is your customer by default, not by choice, by geography. Now we enter the second half of the list, where the businesses get more interesting and less obvious. Business 6, the feed store and farm supply. The U.S. retail nursery, garden, and farm supply market is $38.1 billion, according to IBIS World. Animal feed production alone is $122.6 billion. Every rural community with livestock needs a feed store, every single one. One operator took on $600,000 in initial inventory, and that wasn't reckless. That's what it takes to stock a proper farm supply store that can compete with Tractor Supply. But here's the counter-narrative. You don't compete with Tractor Supply on price. You'll lose that fight every time. You compete on knowledge, community, and niche specialties. Non-GMO feed, Amish community supplies, specific livestock medications that the big box doesn't carry, locally sourced products. One feed store owner described it this way. You become the person everyone calls when their goat is sick at 9 p.m. That relationship is worth more than any advertising budget ever will be. The margins aren't spectacular, maybe 25% to 35% on most products, but the recurring revenue is bulletproof. Animals eat every single day. That customer isn't buying once and disappearing. They're loading up their truck every 2 weeks for the next 20 years. Morgan Housel puts it in a way I never forget, and same as ever. The businesses that endure aren't the most innovative. They're the ones attached to behaviors that never change. And feeding livestock is a behavior that hasn't changed in 10,000 years. Business 5, tree removal and stump grinding. The tree care and arborist services market is $26 billion in 2026, according to IBIS World. That breaks down to tree and shrub pruning at 44%, emergency tree services at 24%, and felling and stump removal at 24%. Rural areas get hit harder by storms, have more mature trees, and have less access to municipal tree services. That's your entire market handed to you by geography. Here's what nobody tells you about this business. The real money isn't in felling trees, it's in stump grinding. Tree removal is dangerous, insurance heavy, and physically brutal. Stump grinding? One operator, one machine. $150 to $500 per stump, 6 to 10 stumps a day. That's $900 to $5,000 in daily revenue with dramatically lower liability and a fraction of the risk. And here's the trick most people miss. Many tree removal companies don't own stump grinders. They subcontract that work out. So you build a business that feeds off other businesses. You're not marketing to homeowners. You're marketing to the 15 tree companies in your county and becoming their go-to stump guy. They sell the job, you grind the stump, everyone gets paid. That's a B2B model disguised as manual labor. The classic beginner mistake, failing to charge for chip cleanup. Stump grinding generates massive piles of chips and dirt. If your contract doesn't specify that cleanup is extra, you eat hours of unpaid labor hauling debris. Put it in writing, charge for it. That one clause turns a $200 job into a $350 job. And nobody blinks because they'd rather pay you than deal with a 4-foot pile of wood chips in their yard. Business 4, well drilling and water services. This is where we enter serious money territory. The U.S. water well drilling services market is estimated at $9.9 billion in 2026, with a 1.7% compound annual growth rate. In rural America, if you don't have municipal water, you need a well. Period. There is no alternative. There is no substitute. There is no app for it. Revenue per job ranges from $10,000 to $50,000, depending on depth, geology, and casing requirements. One well per week at an average of $20,000 per job puts you at over $1 million in annual revenue. Even at just 2 wells per month, you're looking at $480,000 a year from a single rig. But here's the honest part, and I owe you honesty on this one. This business has a high barrier to entry, and it should. Almost every jurisdiction requires strict licensing, often multi-year apprenticeships before you can operate independently. Drilling rigs, support trucks, casing materials, and fuel represent a massive capital investment, and operators on Reddit are brutally honest about the risk. One bad well, equipment failure at 300 feet, unexpected rock formations, contaminated aquifers can wipe out the profits from 9 good wells. That barrier is precisely what makes it lucrative. The licensing requirement, the capital requirement, the years of apprenticeship, all of them function as a moat. The same way a medical degree limits the supply of doctors, well drilling certifications limit the supply of drillers. And in a rural county with 3 well drillers serving a population that keeps building new homes, the pricing power is enormous. You're not competing on price, you're competing on availability. Business 3, private rural trash and waste collection. Here's a business that generates the most underestimated recurring revenue in small-town America. The total U.S. waste collection industry is roughly $69.46 billion, with private companies holding over $20 billion of that market. In rural counties where the municipality doesn't provide curbside pickup and there are thousands of them, somebody has to fill that gap, and that somebody charges for it every single month. Small single-route operators report $170,000 to $220,000 in annual revenue, with $60,000 to $100,000 in net profit. One truck, one route, one subscription base. That's the entire business model. Route density is everything. Software optimization can cut fuel costs by 15% to 25% with better routing. But here's the part that makes this a truly exceptional business. Regulatory hurdles and municipal licensing act as a powerful moat. Once you have the permits, the route, and the customer base, nobody can easily replicate what you've built. And because it's subscription-based, your income is perfectly predictable. You know exactly how much money is coming in next month, the month after that, and the month after that. Think about it this way. What are your customers going to do? Stop producing trash? The demand is permanent, the service is essential, and the competition in rural areas is almost non-existent. This is the purest definition of boring, predictable, recurring income. And it compounds. Every new home built in the county is a new subscriber who never cancels. Business 2, septic tank pumping and services. I saved this near the top for a reason, and you're about to understand why. The U.S. septic services market is projected to exceed $1.7 billion, according to Fortune Business Insights. Experienced operators report 55% to 65% gross margins and 28% to 35% EBITDA margins. Emergency service calls for system backups command $600 to $1,000 per job. Regular residential pumping averages around $400 per ticket. And grease trap pumping for restaurants and commercial kitchens adds monthly and quarterly recurring contracts on top of residential work. Here's the thing about septic. In rural America, there is no sewer system. Every home, every business, every church, every building runs on a septic system that needs pumping every 3 to 5 years. That's not a suggestion. That's a maintenance reality enforced by biology and physics, which means every septic system in your county is a guaranteed recurring customer that renews itself like clockwork. You don't need to sell them, you just need to remind them. Operators on Our Entrepreneur and Our Sweaty Startup emphasize what they call the sweaty advantage. Nobody wants this job. It's dirty, it smells terrible, and you're dealing with exactly what you think you're dealing with. That disgust factor eliminates 99% of potential competitors before they even start. Meanwhile, many existing operators are mom and pop shops that don't use modern CRM systems, don't have websites, and don't show up on Google. An operator with a pump truck, a clean website, and a basic Google Ads presence can dominate an entire county within a year. The startup cost is significant. Used pump trucks run $15,000 to $125,000. Disposal fees vary wildly based on county facility access, but the revenue scales fast once the customer base is built. Here's the pattern. The business that's the most physically uncomfortable to do is usually the least competitive, and the least competitive businesses have the highest margins. That pattern has repeated on this list 14 times now. It's not a coincidence, it's a law. And now we arrive at business number 1, the one I told you about at the beginning, the one that generates more long-term wealth in rural America than almost anything else on this list. Rural self-storage. The U.S. self-storage industry is worth $45.33 billion. About 16% of all facilities are in rural areas. And here's the number that changes everything. Independent owners still control over 56% of the national market. This isn't dominated by corporations yet. The little guy still has room. And in small towns, the little guy has a massive advantage because he knows the community, owns the land, and understands local demand better than any corporate chain ever will. Now, traditional storage builds cost millions, but rural operators play a completely different game. Shipping containers on owned land, covered parking for boats, RVs, and farm equipment, converted barns and agricultural buildings rezoned for storage. One operator in a town of 8,000 people started with 20 shipping containers on family land and was cash flowing within 6 months. No loan, no construction crew, just containers, gravel, and a padlock. Let me break down the economics. The average self-storage tenant pays $128 per month and stays for 14.5 months. That's $1,856 per tenant over their average stay. A 100-unit facility at $128 per month per unit generates $153,600 per year in gross revenue. At 200 units, $307,200. And the operating costs? Minimal. No inventory. No employees in most small facilities. A security camera, a gate, and a payment kiosk. The profit margins in self-storage routinely exceed 40%, and in rural areas with lower land costs and property taxes, they can push past 50%. But here's what makes self-storage the number 1 business on this list. It's not just the revenue, it's the principle it represents. Jim Collins writes about it in Good to Great. The best businesses aren't built on brilliance. They're built on discipline, applied to a simple, repeatable model. Self-storage is the simplest model in business. You build a box. Someone puts their stuff in the box. They pay you every month. They almost never leave because moving your stuff is harder than paying rent on it. And when they do eventually leave, someone else rents the box the same week. That's passive. That's recurring. That's compounding. And in a small town where land is cheap, construction costs are a fraction of metro areas, and demand exists because people always accumulate more stuff than they have room for, self-storage isn't just a good business. It's a wealth-building machine that runs while you sleep. And that's the list. 15 businesses. Not one of them will ever trend on Twitter. Not one will get featured in a tech magazine. And not one of the people running them will ever go viral. But here's the uncomfortable truth behind this entire list. The money was never hiding in the exciting ideas. It was hiding in the boring ones, the ones that smell bad. The ones that require a truck instead of a laptop. The ones where your competitive advantage is simply being willing to do work that other people consider beneath them. Let me be honest with you for a moment. When I first started researching rural businesses, I expected to find stories of struggle. Small towns dying, opportunities drying up, people left behind. And some of that is real. But what I found more often were quiet operators pulling in $200,000, $300,000, sometimes $500,000 a year from services that their communities literally cannot survive without. No investors, no pitch decks, no followers, just a truck, a skill, and a phone that rings. Think about two people. Marcus graduated college, moved to the city, spent 3 years trying to build an app that nobody downloaded, burned through his savings, and went back to a 9-to-5, making $55,000. Tyler never left his hometown. He bought a used pump truck for $22,000, started pumping septic tanks, and by year 3, he was netting $180,000 with a waiting list of clients. 5 years later, Tyler owns 3 trucks, employs 4 people, and just broke ground on a 40-unit storage facility on the edge of town. His portfolio of boring assets generates more wealth than Marcus's degree ever promised. Marcus chased exciting. Tyler chose boring, and boring paid. The question isn't which of these businesses is best. The question is, which one fits where you already are? What does your town need that nobody is providing? What service makes people uncomfortable enough that the competition stays away? What can you start with a truck, a tool, and a willingness to do the work? Ask yourself that. And if one of these 15 businesses keeps coming back to your mind tonight, if you keep thinking about it while you're brushing your teeth or lying in bed, that's probably your answer. Hit that like button. It helps, more than you know. Subscribe if you want us to keep talking about real businesses that build real wealth in real towns. Tell me in the comments which one of these 15 surprised you the most. I'm Jack, and I'll see you in the next one.